mate
Yeah.
and another person who has done great things, or at least tried to, for the
Yeah.
citizens. You know.
Yeah,
Have you-
well, if I may,
Go right
first
ahead,
of
sir.
all,
It's-
greetings
it's
to
your
you,
house,
to you
sir.
brothers. Greetings. You know, I don't expect nor do I desire for there to be a lack of objectivity. I want to have a real discussion about what distinguishes our work,
Mhm.
right? And what this moment calls for. Because this moment, while it is about Jackson residents, while it is about how we advance and move forward, it's also about the entire dynamic we face right now.
Mhm.
I just got off the phone right before I came here with a gentleman talking about, you know, whether his grandchildren were going to have to live in a fascist society.
Slow
right?
down. Wait. What is a fascist society?
Oh,
and then
you
come
know,
back to that,
absolutely.
please. Yeah, please.
Well, you know, it's you know, to give the illustration, it's the same society that we recognize that Hitler created, right? A society in which, you know, leadership does not, you know, engage, or leadership, the people have no say so, right? They are dictated to, and you know, it absolutely takes advantage of certain groups, right? Of certain communities for the benefit of a single community,
Mhm.
right? And so we want to ensure that that doesn't happen in our city. We want to make certain that people know that this is a trend around the country. Some people have asked me, you know, why are these mayors from other cities supporting me and coming out? They're not from Jackson. Well, you know, the reason that Adrian Perkins is supporting me, former mayor of Shreveport, is because it happened in his city, right? Because he recognizes that when he came into office, there were 5 black mayors that were the mayors of the largest cities in Louisiana. Now there's one, and she's about to be term limited, right? And that's Latoya Cantrell. We see it in St. Louis and Tashara Jones, who just, you know, the narratives they ran behind her, she's gone. You know, we saw it in Stockton, California, with the brother, you know, Michael Tubbs, who was not only endorsed by Obama and by, you know, Oprah Winfrey, right? Republican leadership took over there, right? And so we've seen these efforts all across the nation, not only in terms of the politics and the negative narratives that they create, but in terms of legal attacks.
Mhm.
I actually, you know, choose not to speak specifically, but I can think of 6 mayors that are dealing with the same thing that I'm dealing with. All black, all
Wow.
black,
Okay.
right?
Now let
Uh,
me ask Mayor Lumumba: are there any Europeans or any other brothers and sisters that are also dealing with the same thing? Is it just
Yeah,
target?
I can't say that there are none, right? I
Okay.
can tell you that it is disproportionately
Put it on the scale.
disproportionately black leadership or progressive leadership, right? And so, you know, I can't really get into the details of that,
Okay,
right?
thank you.
But I will say that people have to have their eyes open, right? And understand what this is about. And understand that you know, I'm not so special. I'm not so important that the attack is about me. The attack is on your self-determination.
Mm.
The attack is on your ability to dictate, you know, the direction that this city goes in. The attack is on your ability to be a part of the process that leads Jackson into, you know, what we all deserve. And while we've had victories, you know, I would be the first to tell you that, 1, I'm not satisfied, and 2, there's a lot more that we can do. But as we grow through that process, as we struggle for progress, right? Um, we need the type of people working with us that is not above reproach, is not
Mhm.
above correction, right? So I tell people, whether you've agreed with everything I've done or not,
Mm.
I'm still your mayor, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I'm going to be the one that's going to receive your correction. I'm going to receive your critique. And over 8 years, and this is the last thing I'll say. I know I can go, right?
No.
Yeah.
It's this morning. It's about you sharing.
Yeah.
We got 40 some odd thousand people that need to show up
Wow. Yeah.
on the
Absolutely.
22nd.
Absolutely.
So whatever we have to do to rally them
Yeah.
to hear the story and incite them that, hey,
Yeah.
you guys need to come. So go right ahead,
Yeah.
Mayor.
No, I would just say over the 8 years that I've been in office, there's certainly some work, you know, dealing with the school system, you know, bringing in historic money that we're proud of. But this job is more than a notion, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that I've learned. And so if given the opportunity, there are some things that I might choose to do differently. You know, I don't have to. I don't have to show up to every fight that I'm invited to.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
That's
Choose your
true.
battles.
You know,
Choose,
in
you gotta-
spite of
hey.
when we look at the garbage contract, right? I've prayed on this, spent a lot of time on this. You know, it was a lot of thought. I absolutely feel when we consider, the cost to residents and what they're being charged, right? And the fact that the contract that they were trying to put up was $13 million more.
Mhm.
And when we look at the fact that they're trying to raise residents' water bills today, after having just raised their water bills last year,
Mhm.
I am definitive that we were on the right side of history. But at the same time, the scripture says that those that guard their mouth and their tongue avoid calamity, right?
Mhm.
And so it also says, be angry, but don't sin, right? And so, even when, it appears that the other side doesn't represent the same sincerity, we still have to invite or self-critique to a point that we find, civil ways of disagreeing, right?
Y'all seem pretty.
Yeah.
Y'all seem pretty. At the last city council meeting, y'all seem pretty unified on that
Yeah.
fact that
Well, everybody gets a little happy around election time. Nobody, nobody really wants to be seen as the one. But they were unified, on the issue of the water rates. Again, just connecting these things. They were realizing that these are reasonable questions, and the third party administrator came out gunning for me, right?
Yeah.
He was talking about all the things I had brought up, and as if it's a personal thing. Let's make sure that we have history correct.
yeah, but
Yeah.
put us on it because
Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot or seeing a lot of this. Some of these different news sites, they spin things a
Yeah.
certain type of way and say you
Yeah.
got an issue with.
Yeah, well, first let's go through the history of how Ted Hennepin got here. Ted Hennepin came here as a fellow of the U.S. Water Alliance.
Okay.
I and my administration, I don't like to say we, right? We brought Ted, the U.S. Water Alliance here, right? They do work around the world in dealing with issues of water insecurity and water justice. And so they were bringing technical support in order to assist us in the midst or the height of our crisis, right? And so at that time where you had experts from all over the country, in fact, the world, that were helping at our water treatment facility, and a lot of people don't even understand what happened, and that's a longer conversation. But when they came, we were looking for someone that could take over the leadership because we had made an agreement with the federal government of a path forward. And so we needed somebody to lead that work. And so Ted was recommended, from a lot of people because of how he was working at the plant with, the many people that were there. And I agreed to Ted. I met with him. I had Ted at my house for dinner. Had catfish and red beans and rice. Right, my wife can cook. Right, and so I did everything to bring him in. Early in the process, some of the community members, some of the organizers had concerns about some of the things that Ted was saying. Right, saying that he was giving two contradictory messages, depending on the audience that he was in front of.
Yeah.
And so I was saying, listen, y'all, we got to give him a shot, right? We can't be at war with everyone. So, I was the one who was trying to make certain that we kept everyone together. It wasn't until, there were deeper discussions about, hey, Ted, we got to make sure that we leave space for community to come and talk about their water bills. We can't lock them out. We have to have a place that they can come to. Just simply giving them, grocery stores or satellite locations that they can pay their bills isn't the solution because people, sometimes these bills aren't correct, right? Sometimes people have other issues. Sometimes, Star Grocery, while, they may accept the bill, they are in no position to talk about the legitimacy of the bill or lack thereof. And so he wasn't willing to do that, right? When we had conversations about, people he was adding to the team. And I said, listen, I'm just providing you information that the person you got over your billing, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but they were with us before. And, it wasn't working out. And so I don't want you to make the same errors that we made, right? And now we see a water utility that is billing at 55%, receiving at 55%, as recently as February. There have been recent times within the last 18 months or so where, they've built, below 50, 45%. And so when we are saying we're raising the rates on Jacksonians, then they want to know, well, how's the billing going?
Mhm.
When you're saying you're raising the rates on Jacksonians and you're not doing competitive procurement, when you give a $30 million contract to Jacobs Jacobs Engineer, and I'm not saying that they're not the best option, but what I'm saying is we deserve to do our research.
Right.
And that's just one contract. That's just the largest contract. You're very rarely doing competitive procurement on any contracts. When you're saying that you're raising the rates on Jacksonians and you're not charging ratepayers who live outside of Jackson the same availability charge. They don't have to have that $40 charge added to them. And you're not charging them the increase that you're asking for now. When you're saying that you want to raise rates on Jacksonians and, you're getting paid $400,000 a year, right, for being here 2 weeks out of a month, right?
Right.
And the person under you makes $250,000 a year. We want to make certain that we're minimizing overhead where it can be minimized in order to ensure that we're not trying to get too much blood out of the turnip. When we decided to raise the salaries of public safety officials in the city of Jackson, we didn't do that because we got a printing press and we're all of a sudden printing money, right?
Mhm.
We did that because we had to make cuts, or we had to, identify new ways of gathering the revenue,
I
right?
remember y'all had to collapse a few positions.
Absolutely. We absolutely did. And so, these are reasonable questions. And so, as you witnessed, the council, I really was able to take kind of a,
Aaron Banks showed out, man.
a docile position because, the council, at a certain point, there comes a time where you've told us things so many times, and then when it's a different narrative, a different story, the people have questions. Right?
Mayor, let me ask this. Regardless of who's in the position after June 3rd, will the relationship become better, or do you see it steady going in a direction that that's not productively beneficial for the citizens of Jackson?
I think that people have to be concerned, and this is why who is in the leadership is so important, right? Because it is a narrative that is being put out there that all you need is someone who can get along, right? I wasn't mayor when they tried to take the airport, right? I wasn't mayor when they took as long ago took the reservoir from Jackson, right? And so we're speaking as if when I came in office, they stopped giving resources that they were given previously. They hadn't stopped giving anything that they never gave us any resources, right? Especially not to the extent that we're deserving, which is representative of who we are, right? Representative of what we contribute. We're 25%. We're a quarter of the GDP for the state of Mississippi. We are, without question, the economic engine, right? And so, what has, led to some disagreements, and be clear that we've been able to work with. I've worked with Roger Wicker and Benny Thompson to get the $800 million here. I work with Governor Phil Bryant to make sure that we maintain ownership and control of our school district. Where there was a disagreement is when the lieutenant governor, precisely, came to me and said, unless you give up your airport, none of Jackson's legislative requests are going to be met, right? And so when someone says they have the relationships, then what is different about your stance than mine's that we deserve to maintain our airport? There's a difference between being friendly and being a friend, right? People can pat you on the back. They can take you to dinners and all those good things, right? But a friend ensures that they fight for your interests. A friend ensures that your people don't suffer. A friend ensures that your communities aren't in lack. And so that's the position that I hold and have always represented. And when I go to the state, people talk about being able to talk. When I go to the state or anyone else, I don't go with the hat in hand approach. I'm a nice guy. Please take care of my city. I come with facts and information and research. People have to know how we saved that school district, right? It was not only knocking on 60,000 doors with commUNITY, with organizations like One Voice and Kellogg Foundation. It was also by having community forums. But more important, not more importantly, but additionally, when I came to the governor, I had understanding that he had friends, supporters, campaign supporters who had invested in housing in Jackson, right? And I came to him and I said, listen, what happens to that housing that they're building if the state takes over the school district? Nobody wants to live in a state-controlled school district. They're going to lose.
Right.
And he recognized that. He said, I wish I had a third way. And so that's why we went and identified a third option. Even when I talk about the $800 million, there were all of our delegation. Here's the truth. All of our delegation participated and were on calls every Friday with that. There were some of our Republican delegation that said, listen, we're not going to vote for it, but we may work behind the scenes, in order to make certain that it gets passed, right? And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty.
That was the passing for the $800 million?
For the $800 million, right?
Okay.
And so I appreciate that honesty. But also what we did, we more than just challenged, we made a national case. I took the voices of Jacksonians because we've been dealing and enduring with water insecurity all my life. Right?
Mayor, why is it why is it that people that they have displaced that approach? Why is it that we feel like you're supposed to be responsible for the 20 years prior to coming in?
Yeah.
Why is it that at what point did you realize, darn, there's a lot more going on under the sheets of paper that's here on this desk, because there's no clean, you didn't get a clean slate, did you?
No, I didn't. But when you sign up for this position, you sign up to be judged, you sign up to be misjudged, right? And so that's why you can neither get too high or too low. Not too high as to, lose your humility and think that you're God's gift, nor too low that you lose the confidence and the determination to do the work that you were, elected to do. But, more cities than we know, especially legacy cities and majority-controlled cities have, infrastructure challenges and water infrastructure insecurity, and they're only but a minute away.
And
right?
what is a legacy city?
A legacy city are older cities.
Okay.
Cities that are aging, that their infrastructure is aging.
Thank you.
When we compare ourselves to Madison or to Flowood, first, those cities are the size of one of our wards, right? So when we talk about the scale of what we have to maintain, it isn't a proper comparison. But also they're newer cities, right?
Right.
They've had newer investment, and so and they have proportionately more revenue to provide to their needs than a city of Jackson, who has lost population. And when they left, we've been losing population for years. The biggest population drop happened around 2010.
That had nothing to do with you.
Yeah, we forget. People are talking about people leaving. We forget that a whole city, incorporated itself that used to be Jackson. We forget that Byram, used to be Jackson, and we don't count that in the numbers.
I didn't even recall that.
Yeah, and so we give these narratives and we adopt other people's narratives instead of having the power of information in this discussion. But going back to what we did to work to make certain that we could get that money. We not only spoke to the legacy problems and challenges we've had with water insecurity to make it a national conversation. That wasn't some personal objective of mine, but I did go on national platforms so that we could not only challenge our opposition, those who have chosen or neglected to support us, but we challenged our friends, because I understood that, President Biden, who came here, right? Remember during the Democratic primary of the last presidential election before this, Elizabeth Warren did her town hall here, right? Bernie Sanders and I did a town hall together, right?
All this been forgotten.
Yeah.
Displaced.
Michael Bloomberg, one of the wealthiest people in the world, right? He and I did a town hall together. And this was a strategic relationship building effort that I did so that I knew we would have needs, right? I may not have known that water would be the most preeminent one, right? But I knew we would have needs. And so when we made that national case, I knew that they would have to respond.
Right.
Right. And so they did it in a historic way. They did it in a unique way because, people have to understand that the way that they gave us money in an omnibus bill, meaning that there is a final bill that at the end of a Congress each year, they pass what you call an omnibus bill, right? And, they had concerns about the midterm elections and whether Democrats would control both the House and the Senate. And they knew that they would have gridlock in Congress. And so we found a way that they would pass it before the new Congress even took hold, right? And that's why it came in omnibus bill. And it was more money than we've ever received in Jackson's history, in Mississippi's history, in United States history. No city has had a direct appropriation.
Question: would those people have come
Mhm.
if your character wasn't glowing?
Yeah.
Would those people have made an effort to come and sit with you or stand
Absolutely
in a town?
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Not only, and I don't represent myself
Yes,
to
sir.
be perfect, right? And I don't think we should represent ourselves to be perfect. But I know that they certainly would not have come if they had any question about
Who you are.
what I am being charged
Right,
with
right.
now,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And they certainly would not have come if they didn't think that I was sincere in the work that we're doing.
The love for the city.
And lastly,
Yes,
the
sir.
federal government doesn't let go of nearly $1 billion, right? Unless they have confidence in the program and the work to be done. I'm sitting here, I don't know if he's on camera or not.
No,
but,
he's not. He's not.
But I'll say shout him.
I gotta keep
shout
him
out.
invisible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
he's an
shout him out
invisible man.
anyway. The brother who helps me on detail, Marcus. We call him Goat.
Right.
Goat was with me when I flew to D.C. when I was sick as a dog going for the,
We didn't hear about that.
countless
Right.
times
Right.
where my team said, listen, Mayor, maybe this is the last one that we need to go to D.C. to make sure that we secure the money. And he sat with me. He was in the room when I sat with Senate appropriation staffers, and I had to make the case.
Right.
I had to make the case. I had to talk about why grants were not a sufficient solution for Jackson because we
No
were beyond
coverage.
debt capacity. I had to explain why our water, our water plants were uniquely problematic because of their unique design and using both a conventional and a membrane system, and why that led to staffing challenges because you have very few Class A operators in the country that know how to work both a membrane and conventional system.
Wow.
And fewer in Mississippi because we are one of 2 surface water systems. I had to explain that we had a system that had 50% loss when industry standards is 15, and that we have a distribution problem in Jackson. I had to explain that South Jackson was inequitably affected because they're the furthest away from the water treatment facilities and at higher elevation, and that their pipes are smaller because they were the most recently annexed into the city, and they used to be county. And so we adopted the infrastructure of the county, when we included them into the city. And so they have small diameter pipe. And so while we're trying to push it further, we're also trying to push it through a straw, right? And why there has to be so much work invested in new pipes in our city. And so we were able to talk about it. And I also explained to them that it's more than just inconvenience, that it's more than just not being able to sanitize and clean your body or cook, that it represents cycles of humiliation because when a school is closed, parents have to find alternative childcare for their children. That if you work in a service industry, you have to find alternative ways of how you're going to put food on the table. That if you're in one of the long distribution lines, you have to deal with the indignity of looking like you're begging, right? And so these cycles of humiliation, this is what gets me passionate. People, sometimes may misunderstand where I come from. I'm not angry, right?
Right.
I'm passionate because I love people, right? I don't want anyone to suffer, right? The same passion and Malcolm said it best. He said, I'm for truth, no matter who's telling it. I'm for justice, no matter who it's for or against, right? I've received criticism when, I gave an honest response years ago in my first term when a young lady, a young, high school soon-to-be graduate, the day before, her senior day, hit a manhole cover, flipped and died,
that.
right? I said, listen, while we may not have caused the danger, we failed to respond to it, right? And people were upset with me. But fortunately, her parents appreciated that
Wow.
transparency. And, so no matter what side of town you're on, I'm for you living a better life. I'm for you having access to the quality of life you deserve. And so, leading to things like the zoo. It's not that, I hate a notion of a zoo on the northeast side, right? What I hate is the notion of stripping a community from another resource. What I hate is that we talk about blight and divestment all the time. And we act as if moving a zoo, we call two men in a truck and
I've
move the
heard
zoo
right.
across the
Yeah.
town, right? That it will cost hundreds of millions of
It costs a
dollars.
lot, and
Yeah.
it would tear out the zoo. The zoo is in a very walkable.
Yeah.
It's somewhat walkable. It could do a little touch. We can add some salt. We
Yeah.
we can do stuff, but it's in a pretty centralized area of the city.
Yeah.
People can walk to it. You got that whole Timberline area. That whole people can walk there.
It can
know?
be an anchor, if properly invested in. I've never said that the zoo is in optimal condition, right? I've told you that we're trying to make investments where we can. We've invested in a disc golf course that we've had hundreds of people coming out in order to participate in a sport I know nothing about, right?
Ultimate Frisbee is amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, listen, when we did the ribbon cutting and I saw the guy throw that Frisbee, I mean, it really is a
Right.
sight, to behold when you see they're a little different than the Frisbees we grew up with, right? But it's a fast growing sport that we're spending, we're investing in a amphitheater, right? The money is already there. We're already putting it out for bid where we can have 200,000 people in Livingston Park, right? We're making these investments so that it's a natural transition into the zoo. And so we need more money in the zoo, right? We need more investment there. But if we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, I just simply believe that West Jackson is just as worthy of $100 million investment or more as Northeast Jackson.
We want just hold on. We want to breathe. It's not. Don't want to put our mayor in a position of being defensive. That's an education and information session. So I want to thank you.
Yeah.
Because I'm not informed.
Yeah.
And in order for me to become informed, I've got to not question. I just need to listen.
Yeah.
Just listen. So with that being said, we've got 40,000 people that need to understand. And if they haven't, because apparently they're not tuned in to the information channel of the teaching that you're giving.
Yeah.
We want to hold people accountable for things that they inherited and not created. We want to ask, well, why did you do this? Why? Hey, let's just come up with where we are today and let's move forward.
Yeah.
At some point, we got to wipe. One thing about the chalkboard. Did you have chalkboards when you was coming through?
I did. I'm definitely a chalkboard era. I may have gotten a little more of the marker,
Yes, sir. I'm
towards the end.
RDX was probably the video screen.
Yeah, no, I wasn't a video
I wasn't
screen
part of
era.
that. But
I was around when the smart boards first came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point,
so we have every generation. We have chalkboard started in the middle of chalkboard to markers and then we got digital boards.
So
right?
what I want the listening audience and the viewing audience to understand that when you have a chalkboard and you've done so many equations and so many problems over a period of years, that it's still somewhat difficult to see the new work that's being applied to the chalkboard.
Absolutely.
Okay, no matter how you wipe it down, no matter how you clean it, it's still
traces.
It's still traces. So how do we today, with 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks, how do we communicate to the people who did not come out and participate? About I think we had 20-some thousand that showed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mayor, how do you share with them? Hey, you guys, it's time to rally.
Yeah. Well, it's making sure that they are armed with information, right? And that's what we're trying to do, not only in this program, but as we meet people in community where they are. But also ensuring them, that if they don't participate now, then they likely won't have the ability to participate in the direction that they go tomorrow. I'm not only asking, when I'm asking you for your support, I'm not only asking that you come out and vote for me on April 22nd. My slogan the first time I ran is, when I become mayor, you become mayor.
Right.
And that wasn't just a slogan of accountability. That was a recognition that I don't have all that it takes to do this on my own.
Yes, sir.
I need you to be a part of this. We need you to I need young folks, as this is the demographic we're losing at the most significant rate. Not only in Jackson, Mississippi is losing population. And it is our youngest demographic that is leaving. So we need you to be a part of roundtable discussions where we're talking about city planning and, you know, what it is that you desire in a home. You know, we've learned that younger generations really don't care about a car as much as previous generations, right? So they like walkable cities. They like multimodal mobility cities where whether you use ride share, whether you're riding a bike, a scooter, taking public transportation, you can get to the places you need to get to. That's what we've tried to work on, trying to stand up our public, our public transit system. Created some of the first bike lanes. You ain't, you ride down Mill Street. Now we have a long way to go,
Right.
but
Say that again.
Mill
We got a
Street
what now? We got
bike
what?
lanes on Mill
But
Street
we got a
and
long way.
Meadowbrook. We have a long way to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've supported the museum to market trail because we want you to be able, to have multi-mobility modes of transportation in the city. We've learned that younger generations like public art. We figured out that working with the Jackson Arts Council, that when you were coming in on the bridge on Pearl Street, people forget everybody takes their pictures here, right? But that there was nothing greeting you. So we did the Welcome to Jackson sign, right? Because we wanted to change the perception and the sense of place in our city. We have more murals around the city, and we're doing that because we want you to be inspired and love your city. Understand the genius of who you are when you go on the backside of the old Capitol Inn, right in front of the two Mississippi museums, and you see David Banner, Thalia Mara, you see Medgar Evers, you see, all of these iconic faces, right? So that you know that you're a part of a not only literary genius, but a creativity where the soil is fertile here in Jackson. We critique what we want to see changed, and that's appropriate, that's rightfully so. But we can't forget who we are, and lose sight of that because we lose the confidence that we can go in the place that we need to go. There's a lot that concerns me in this election, and that's what I'm talking to people about, right? You need to know that in the Democratic primary that there were, Republicans who sent out a clarion call on the North Side Sun for them to, go and vote for my opponent, right? To give him an advantage, and these are the same Republicans that voted for Donald Trump. The same Donald Trump that has this country, in shambles. The same country, the same state that is, taking away programs and firing people and laying people off. That is disproportionately affecting our community. And so you need to be concerned about that. But at the same time, my campaign isn't an anti-campaign.
Right.
It isn't just about don't vote for this person. I also want you to know where we're going, right? I want you to know that we have, dedicated lines of funding for the first time in the city's history to deal with our infrastructure challenges. And so we can give programmatic solutions to those challenges. That one of the issues we've had with infrastructure is that we take the big pot of money and we sprinkle a little bit here and there, which does not allow for routine maintenance, right? I want you to know that we have a comprehensive strategy when it comes to public safety, where we're not only talking about, ensuring that our public safety officials, our police officers have dignity in their jobs, that they're making salaries that help support their families and their lives, right? But we're also making investments in community, working with Operation Good, working with Living with Purpose, working with Strong Arms of Jackson, these organizations which are in community, ensuring that they're doing all that they can to diffuse or bring down conflict, right? And so these are important investments that we're making, and we have economic strategies, right? Understanding that there are communities that really, are going to be fine, one way or the other without us. The Fondrens, the Bellhavens, the downtowns.
Right.
But when we look at South and West Jackson, we realize that banks are a little more reluctant to spend there. And so because they don't see them as being investor ready, they're not certain that the market will yield the return that they want to yield, right? And so we're doing a revolving loan fund where we can act as the bank for developers. We can, field projects. When we talk about things like, food insecurity has been a big thing with me. When I started with the Bloomberg Harvard Leadership Initiative, we were the recipient of the public arts grant, and we decided to do a public arts piece on food insecurity. In fact, the name of that particular grant was Fertile Ground. So when we see Fertile Ground Brewery, they took the name from that work, right? uh, and so we wanted to not only engage in discussions about, what it looks like to eat healthy and healthier options, but additionally, we wanted to bring programs that support. So, I've been to Atlanta where we can talk about, communities that are food deserts,
Mm-hmm.
and how we work with some of the organizations like Uber Eats, to make certain that we have a program of fresh produce within those communities as a more immediate solution, but also how we reduce the offerings of grocery stores so that they can withstand the critical first years, not having maybe 15 name brands, but reducing it
That's
to
what I
maybe
wanted
three or
to ask
four.
about a little
Yeah.
bit. When it comes to addressing the food desert
Hmm.
question situation, I've been seeing a lot of data, a lot of research and stuff coming out that these big box grocery stores like your Walmarts, your Costco's, your Best Buys, your Sam's, all this, that they actually end up bankrupting the city over time even more. Because
Mm.
I heard somewhere that the city has to pay for these upkeeps on these buildings they're really not supposed to be around for more than 15 years, and they end up not even actually selling them. They say, "Oh, well, you can lease them, but we're
Yeah.
not going to sell them." So how are you?
So
You
so
know,
we did not lease the Sam's building. That was their building. However, or the owner of that particular, the city had no ownership. But cities certainly often make the mistake of over incentivizing.
mm,
State does
Certain
too,
big,
doesn't it? I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
say that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the example would be the Pearl outlets, right? Where they gave tax free leases to some of the anchor stores at the Pearl outlet mall,
Yes, sir.
and I think it was for a 5-year period or so, or an initial period. And once that period expired, they packed their bags and they left,
mm.
right? And so you have to make certain that you're doing it intelligently. That while you want to entice or solicit industry and opportunity in your city and amenities in your city, that you don't leverage too much.
Hmm.
And so that speaks to your question.
So how do we? I want to kind of. What are some ways that community members could tap in
Yeah.
to not only be able to get the information that I'm talking about, but also be able to encourage more embedded
Yeah.
grocery stores, more community embedded grocery stores?
Well,
And,
one,
and Mayor, and tie that into
Mhm.
these 25,000
Yeah.
Yeah.
votes
yeah,
that the Lumumba camp
yeah.
needs to have to say,
Absolutely.
I've been
Absolutely.
putting in the work and I see the finish, not the finish
Well,
line, but I can see
yeah.
through the darkness.
Well, I can see where we can continue to progress.
Yes,
right?
sir.
And we're gonna leave it in better. We're gonna leave it when we leave it. It'll be in a better condition than we received it. Right. So one, I can say that I want those 25,000 people to come out and vote. Right. Because I'm not asking you just to vote. I'm asking you to be a part of this process. Turning it to your question, right? How they can become more aware is coming to things like people's assemblies. And that's how we're asking you to be a part of this process so that you can be a part of what the budget looks like, right? You know what the people's assembly process is, where we're
Yes.
mapping out solutions together, where we're identifying and understanding, and y'all are holding me accountable by saying this is what came out of the assemblies, and you need to produce on this,
Mhm.
right? And we're trying to see where we can make gains on that, where we can educate, as I was talking about before, about what maybe a grocery store needs to look like. It reduces, the number of name brands. Maybe we don't start with a deli because those are the highest expenses, right? How are we creating cooperative enterprise, right? Because, in a 83, to 85% black city, I'm certainly unapologetic about supporting black business. If 85% of your population, we can't just
Right.
stop there.
Right.
We also have to understand that we've had businesses that have done well in Jackson, but have packed up their bags because while residents were faithful to them, it wasn't a reciprocal relationship.
Mm.
And so the Sams of the world left, not because they weren't profitable in Jackson. In fact, early on, they were more profitable in Jackson than they have been where they are now, right? But because it wasn't a reciprocal relationship, they just assumed if we cross the line, they'll still come. And so by creating cooperative enterprise, not only are we able to build and fill our voids within the community, we can also not only identify how we'll labor, but we get to determine what the fruits of our labor will be. And that the mission of those businesses is to serve the communities that gave rise to them. And so when I'm talking about this revolving loan fund, I'm not only talking about it in terms of supporting, the private projects that developers want to do, but the community projects that the community wants to see, right? Whether we can have a community-owned grocery store, and I'm a student of history, brother Howard, right? We have to recognize the brilliance of a sister like Fannie Lou Hamer, who organized poor farmers in the Mississippi Delta so that they could, make ends meet. Because the notion of how poor people pool their resources together in order to thrive, in order to compete in a capitalist society isn't an original one. It isn't a new idea. Now, what we can make original is how we expand on that idea, how
Power.
we build on that idea, how we're doing cooperative housing, right? So that people have, a space to lay their head and the dignity and the comfort of home, right? When people don't have a lease on life, when they feel that they're living on the fringes of society, then you have the interruption of violence far too often. Even though I was blessed, right? That I was never rich. Let's be clear.
Right.
People think that. My father used to say that everybody thinks I'm rich, and he says, I'm not, and I don't have what they think I have, but I can't tell them that I'm not, because when that big case comes, they want the rich lawyer to handle it.
Right.
And so that's what he used to say.
I heard about that van that y'all was riding around in.
Yeah. Oh, that's that's a funny story, right? But I did not have the lack that some other people in our community have had, right? And so we have to understand that when those people live with that lack, then they have a different view of life, right? And even in my circumstance, maybe having a little more fortune than some of the people we're discussing, when I got a house, right? I started thinking about, maybe I want to get some health insurance. Maybe I want to stay around, right? Like my view.
I want to see my assets.
Yeah. My view on life, right, became different. But when you're merely surviving, right, then maybe temporary problems you may seek permanent solutions to. And so we have to deal with the trauma that's happening in community. That's not to say that we're okay or we're going to be friends of crime. My brother was shot in the head here in Jackson, Mississippi.
Never heard that before. Okay.
On the corner of Poindexter and Lynch Street. My brother was shot in the head.
Okay.
Right? And so, I've felt and seen the experience of family, when they deal with the most violent of circumstances.
Wow.
But we have to make sure that we're making the proper investments, that we catch it before it gets to that point.
Yes, sir.
By the time the police are called, it's already gone wrong.
That's
right?
true.
Right.
And so we have to stop it before.
So I
All
wanted
right.
to.
Hold on.
Oh,
we got to get him out of here.
Yeah.
I got you.
We got one little mind food. And out of X-Men, you did really well representing the next ones up. I met this gentleman at Kwanzaa through Coach Abasi.
Okay.
So we say if you just come out one night,
Yeah.
meeting a person would alter the trajectory of your life. So we've got one. We're gonna let turn it over. You got to give him the test right. Don't turn it over. Yeah.
Oh, like that?
Yeah. Turn the test over.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't look at it yet.
And I'm always humbled to say thank you for taking time out and informing and educating us on some of the things that are going on. There's a lot of chatter in our social media boxes, and it seems to be between the same people. But thank you for holding up and being professional.
Well, I appreciate it.
Last but not least, if this doesn't go in the direction of the work that has been done, do you see yourself coming back at a later date? If for some odd reason, yes, sir. Do you see yourself?
What I can say is this: I will always work for community.
Okay.
Right. Whether that is in the form of electoral politics, I can't say that.
Yes, sir.
Right. I don't know. I'm going to be, one, disciplined to what the Lord has for
Powerful.
me. Right. But two, the Lord has invested and sown into me, not only, being a part of this work, but a family, right? He gave me a family.
Yes, sir.
Where it was important to work within community. And so, I don't know that I could be breathing, right?
Yes, sir.
Without doing some community work. So I can assure you of that, right?
Okay.
That's the only thing I can say. But I don't think we should be running for office unless it's necessary, right? So whether it's myself or whether it were somebody else, my prayer and my hope is always that we are advancing and that we're in a better place.
Powerful.
Right? And I'm simply speaking today about what, my very, heartfelt burning concerns are about the opposition, right? And speaking to the vision of where we want to go.
Yes, sir. My dad has always said, and it's a blessing to have a man. All of us don't get an opportunity to have a man in our life, and then it's the time frame that we have him. Sometimes I have to step away so people miss me.
Yeah.
Because all of the responsibility and all the blaming and the shaming is directed at me. But once I'm removed, then you'll see that it was never I.
And sometimes that's the way that the Creator, the Lord does it.
Yes,
right?
sir. And I was speaking on myself, man.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
yes,
no.
Yes,
Sometimes that's the way He does it. And His ways are higher than our ways.
Wow.
His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. So I receive that. And whatever the Lord has, I shared before, I have peace. Right?
Yes, sir.
I don't want to see our people suffer.
Right.
I don't want to see our people lose access and control and influence in this process, because we're seeing that on the national scale right now. We're seeing people's Social Security threatened. We're seeing healthcare threatened. We're seeing our history, their attempt to erase it. I went to Tuskegee University. For there to be a decision to remove their history, from military study, to remove Jackie Robinson, to remove Medgar Evers, right? To remove Medgar Evers, right? That just speaks to, the direction that they want to go in. We're told that, that Socrates, gave the foundation, and he said that it was actually Imhotep, right? He told the truth, right? That the foundation of intellectual pursuits is to know thyself. And so when our babies can't see themselves in the history of the world,
that's true.
Then how do we expect them to take their rightful place in its future? So that's why history and this information is so important. Our children deserve to know that people who look like them were some of the first to perform brain surgery, and inventors of medicine and mathematics, some of the first to have great debates on politics and religion back in Timbuktu. And they don't need to know this so that they feel that they're better than anyone else.
Right.
But they deserve to know that they're just as good as anyone.
True.
Right. That's what our effort has to be.
Wow. Hey, we've got our mayor in here today. Hopefully this conversation was as juicy as the last one that we have, the sharing. So I just can't thank you enough for our community conversation, Community Strong with Jxn MS, because you could have gone anywhere else in the world to provide the services that you've put forth the effort for here in the city.
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate it. And I don't, I receive that.
Yes,
and
sir.
I'm grateful for that. But I want to be clear that I'm a part of this work because Jxn has given me far more than I could ever give it. Right. This was the best decision my parents ever made. This is where I found community. I grew up, in a village. When I would go around the corner, right, to play in the circle, right?
Oh yeah.
By the time I made it, Miss Willis would say that I'm over there, right? Miss Camaro would say, well, they over here, this is what they doing, right? By the time I was coming back, Miss Dafe would tell her that I was back on the way, right? And so, we really did make this whole notion of viewing the community as a family a part of our existence. Now, I have a really big family, y'all, right? I have a really big family. They just don't live here. My dad was one of 8. His mom was one of 15. Her mom was one of 15. My grandmother's first cousin was Joe Lewis, right? So if I sometimes
the boxer Joe Lewis?
The boxer Joe Lewis. So if you feel like I got a fighter spirit, it's because I have a fighter spirit. We can identify with it. Yeah, okay. My grandfather was a professional boxer.
Okay.
And so, but, we only wage this struggle out of love, right? And if you've ever met my sister, she has that same spirit.
Yes, sir.
Right? And, I love that my parents, thought enough of us and thought enough of this community to make those investments.
Well, I can't thank your dad enough for saying, hey, Jackson is home.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much
capital.
for
Absolutely. This is where they're buried, right?
Yes, sir.
This is where they're buried. So it'll always be.
And they could have been buried anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I'm sure they was welcomed anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna ask you to knock that out for us and take your time with us. So I'm sure it's gonna be heartfelt for that applies to me now. It has nothing to do with anybody else in the room. I'm being selfish. I want some of the mayor today.
This says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Genesis 50. Chapter 50, verse 20. There are moments when betrayal cuts deep, when pain becomes personal, and when it seems like darkness is winning. People may lie about you, abandon you, and hurt you without reason. Your faith is tested, and it's in those moments that you might wonder, where is God in all of this? But then, somehow, you're still standing. God's grace proves to be sufficient. His power is made perfect in your weakness. Because what was meant for evil, God used for good. What was meant to break you, built you. What was meant to silence you, shaped your voice. What was meant to bury you, planted you for growth. Please hear me when I say this. God never wastes pain. What others meant for harm, he reroutes into purpose. Every wound has the potential to become a wellspring of wisdom. Every setback presents an opportunity to set you up for something greater by his sovereignty and his goodness. Lean on him, trust him, abide. All right.
Powerful.
Yeah.
I'm about to cry.
No, that's powerful. And I absolutely received that word. I know it was for you, but I'm going to take it.
It was for me.
Too.
I'm being selfish.
I'm
It's
gonna
all about me.
I'm going to get a little bit of that too.
You can get
I'm going to get a little bit of that too.
Okay.
You know, but no, I'm grateful for that word, you know, and you know, I've experienced, you know, trying to do it by my own power, right? You know, my wife and I, you know, we've gone through, you know, challenges like every relationship does, where we tried to do it on our own, only to learn that it doesn't work. I remember, you know, I'll tell this story. I'm saying this to you, brother, because, you know, I know that you're going through phases of life. I remember when we decided we wanted to get married, and we started to look for a house, having not prepared ourselves, weren't worried about even creating credit or whether we had those things.
I know the feeling. I know the path.
And when it came to trying to get our first home, you know, and our credit score came in, the lady who was so eager to show us houses, we couldn't get a call back from her no more, right? We couldn't find her anywhere, right? And so we literally, you know, start sowing into the church and writing on the back of the envelopes scripture and what we were praying for, right? And when I tell you blessings came raining down, I had an unexplainable increase in my credit score. I'm talking about, you know, lots of points.
I know,
lots of points, right?
Yes,
lots of points, right? I had, you know, I even had an unexplainable amount of money in my personal checking account, and I let it sit there. And then I called the bank, and I said, I have money in here that I don't believe is mine. And they told me, Mr. Lumumba, we don't know what to tell you, but that's your money, right? Like, so when I tell you that you know, that his law can't fail him, you know, there are laws that we recognize that are his, that we would, you know, certainly not question. The law of gravity, what goes up must come down, right? The law of how his healing works, right? You know, I tell people that if I fall and scrape my elbow, that you know, when it starts to heal, it'll scab over, right? And it may be at its ugliest point, but that's when he's working, right? And it works in the same way when we're struggling through challenges. When it seems like it's at its work, that's when he's working. That's when he's healing, right? And so I think that'll preach, right? Like, you know, just understanding that when it may not look its most beautiful, understand that he hasn't forgotten you, and that he's healing you and preparing you for better, right? So I appreciate that, brother.
Wow.
Yeah.
Otta X is in the building. Community conversation. Yeah. We got our very own mayor, mayor, and Chokwe Antar Lumumba.
Yes, sir.
Did I do okay that time,
Yeah.
Coach Abasi?
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
thank Coach Abasi for making sure that Mayor got here today to get back on the couch. This is conversation 2. Much success. We need 25,000.
Yeah.
Plus.
Come on out.
Come on out.
Come on out.
Is it a way that do you have any more environments where you're going to be sharing and educating on what you've done and what needs to be done?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to invite them to all of our social media platforms.
Okay.
Let them know that we're going to be hosting some town halls that we want to announce later on. They can come by our headquarters. We're on Martin Luther King, where we always are.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Right near Freedom Corner. Also, let them know that we're going to be looking for them and coming to them for wherever they are, right? And please just engage. We want to invite you out. The people's assemblies are not going to stop.
Yes,
right?
sir.
We need you
Beautiful.
to come out those, and they're led by young people. That's the
That's
other
true.
thing.
Next one's up.
That's the other thing that's so beautiful, right? Is that you see them engaged and taking initiative in their community, because we often talk about them being the future.
They
right?
are.
Here's the reality.
They're today.
Yeah, every modern movement of change
Yes,
has been
sir.
led by young people. From the French Revolution on,
Right.
has been led by young people. I don't know if y'all can hear, like, since we
I thought that was me.
You can hear my stomach.
That was me.
talking?
That was me. I got that one.
My stomach had something to say. I don't know, like it's getting louder and louder.
We're not gonna take
I
up
keep
too
thinking
much
I can
of you.
overtalk it, but
Yes, sir.
it keeps
Yes, sir.
getting louder, right?
Well, I want to thank the mayor for coming out, Lumumba. We look forward to the next 4 years,
Yeah.
and we're excited to have you. And thank you so much for what you've done, and thank
Yeah.
you for being so resilient and so insulated.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's not easy being in the arena.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
Well, I thank y'all. I thank you for this platform that gives information to people. I thank you for the diverse cross sections of our community
Appreciate you, Mayor.
that
Thank
are
you.
represented here, and we need that.
Yes, sir.
Right. I thank you, young brother. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I started this, just because I was young, people question, right?
Oh, yeah,
my
I
sincerity.
heard all about that.
Yeah, question
even when you first did. I
Yeah.
talked to my dad about
Yeah.
it back then. He
Yeah.
was like, "You're
Yeah.
so young," but now,
Yeah.
now,
I want to know. I want to know how you knew about the van. That's what I want to know.
oh,
Do I have
man.
time to tell the van story
Yes,
right
sir.
quick?
It's on you. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
let me
You
tell
took
the van
time.
story.
You
Let me
took
tell
time
the
to
van
come.
story.
Yes, sir.
So this is my opportunity to make a little fun of my dad, right?
Okay.
And my dad, that was my best friend, right? So I always would mess with him, and he would do the same. So when we first moved to Jackson, my father, had to study for the Mississippi bar, right? He was a licensed attorney in Michigan, but he, in order to practice in Mississippi, he had to take the bar, and then he had to wait on his results, but he still had to make income, while we were living here, right? He had to take care of his family. So my father had this brilliant idea, which, on the surface was a decent idea, that he would buy this 15-passenger van, right? And so he brought this 15-passenger van, and the object was to rent it out to churches, schools, organizations, in order to make revenue, right? He printed out all this stationery and all this. Like, to the day he died, we still had Black Star Transportation stationery, right? And so while it was a great plan, the only problem was it was our only vehicle, brother, right? So when we would pick them up, we'd be like, yeah, y'all mind if we go to the grocery store too? Because we got to,
He
we
was
got to
also
make a
giving
quick
papers.
stop.
He was
right?
also giving papers out of it too.
Yeah.
Had to get them up
we
early.
we were one of the early on. We were distributing Jackson Advocates.
Okay.
Right? We would go all over the state. And we would literally putting them in, the old newspaper dispensers that you don't really see
Right.
that much anymore. But I would ride, I remember riding with my dad. I think I told y'all, depending on where we were, my dad would pick up hitchhikers and everything else. So,
Put them to work.
and I used to mess with him to the day. I was like, look, brother, this was your great big plan, right? Like this was your, you just knew you were on it, right? And, my father, what I loved about him, he got so much reward from serving people that my father never really, he knew we needed money to live, but he wasn't really.
He wasn't a money chaser.
He could have,
Yes, sir.
especially where, representing Tupac and, representing Lance Parker and LA riots on the short list to represent OJ. He could have made wealth.
Right.
But that wasn't his focus, right? I remember when clients couldn't pay. To this day, it's now my sister's house. we have 2 metal briefcases that have some type of medical equipment in it, right? We don't know what it is. No modern doctor knows what it is, but there was a client who couldn't pay, and he's just like, well, I'll give you this. And I just messed with him. I was like, I guess you just took the position he's going to take anything, right? We still don't know what it is, right? But, you know, I love that about who he was, and it still speaks to me. You know?
Okay.
So I had to tell the Van story, man.
Yes,
Since you brought it up, I had to.
It had to be told.
Yeah.
Again, my position has always been to humanize the people that come on here, because a lot of times I hear all this nonsense. Look, I'm gonna say what I gotta say. I hear some people, because my views ain't nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Some people get on there and they say, with all this free the land, and if I'm the mayor, what that got you in 8 years? I'm like, well, he's still a human at the end of the day. That he'd been through things, and that he has funny stories to tell us, and that we should, regardless of how this election shakes out, we should still be understanding that we are working with human beings in the community for, I hope, the same goal.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. If you cut me, I bleed, right? Yeah, you know, like anyone else. But, you know, I appreciate this, you know, so that not only for my benefit, you know, so people understand who I am, but, you know, we just need to be able to have real conversations, right? You know, this kind of reminds me of, you know, I like, you know, whoever you call your GOAT, right?
Yes, sir.
I like when I see LeBron and everybody when they do the
Oh, you
know,
set us up on that one. Go ahead. Whoever you.
I know I like when
Yes, sir.
when they sit around and just have conversations, right? Especially, and I'm not, you know, restricting this platform just to the brothers, but especially black men don't take the opportunity to just sit and talk, you know, talk about life, talk about experiences, talk about, you know, victories, talk about failures, talk about, you know, how we felt through those failures, right?
That's powerful. Lifting.
Yeah. So I know that's gratitude for y'all. Thank you.
Well, we're gonna take that and ride with it.
Yeah.
Close us out so we can get up out of here and go out in the city and be some superheroes and change some lives.
Yeah. Just, you know, I still believe that Jacksonians deserve to be empowered to make the decisions of where their city goes. And I submit to you that I'm here for that purpose, not because I have all of the answers. And we've had success together, and we have a vision of where we can go. And we continue to craft that vision collectively. And so I'm asking for your prayers, your vote, and your support on April 22nd. But beyond April 22nd, I'm asking for your commitment to put your hands in the dirt with me so that we can make this city better.
Community Conversation, Special Edition, Conversation 2 with our very own Mayor Lumumba. I didn't want to mess up the first two. I'm on a roll right now.
That'll work.
And we love you, and may you continue to be insulated, protected, and may God continue to touch you and use you as a vessel to get us to the next part of this chapter.
Love y'all.
All right, guys, you guys have a great day, and know that you are a superhero wherever your feet are planted, and we look forward to tuning in and connecting on Sunday. That's it. You guys go to work. Do something today that makes a difference in somebody else's life. Peace.
Peace.
Make sure